Why is everyone considered valuable?
This is God's heart. His heart is for the one.
Everybody can do this.
Talk to God about people before you talk to people about God.
Just start paying attention to them.
If every serious Christian had one person that they were pursuing, like the person in these parables, I think we would change the world. This week on the Reach Podcast. All right, welcome everybody. It is my pleasure to have you today, and we're going to be doing what I think is pretty exciting. We're going to have a mini-series for the next 3 weeks about something really important, and we call it the 1, 2, 3 of relational evangelism. It's really Search's model that we've developed over the last close to 50 years, but it's just an easy way to remember biblical principles about how to share your faith. So we'll get into that with my two very special guests today. I've got on my right Dr. John Hopper, and John is the executive director of Reach. And on my left, this is Don Barkley. He is Search's director of staff training. So gentlemen, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So fun.
Thank you, Blaine.
Yeah.
It's going to be really fun. And so why don't we do this? We're going to do this mini-series over the 1, 2, 3. John, would you give us the 30-second version of the whole 1, 2, 3, and then we'll dive into the first part today?
Sure. So the 1, 2, 3, first of all, it's not a technique, right? So it's not like do step 1, 2, 3 and everything works. So it's just a way for us to remember some really important things. So the first idea that we'll be looking at is valuing the one. So that's the one, right? So, and then we'll sort of delve into what we call 2 principles. So, and one of those principles is that evangelism is a process, and the other is that the results are up to God. And then we get to look at 3 barriers that often keep people from faith. So sometimes we think, well, if we just share the gospel, then that's what'll get them in. But we don't recognize that there are these barriers, the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual barrier that keep people from faith.
It's pretty cool. It's a great help. I'm excited to talk to you guys about it for the next few weeks. And so let's dive right in. So the one of the 1, 2, 3, you mentioned value the one. Where does this come from, and what does it mean? And maybe Don, I'd throw that over to you.
I mean, if you think of one place in the scriptures where there's something lost, one thing that's lost that's very valuable, and it's told 3 different ways in the same place on the same occasion, what would you think of? Luke 15. Luke 15. And as I open my Bible, sometimes called an iPhone, it's a parable with 3 parts. And that's where this notion of valuing the one is so clearly given.
And so I think it'd be helpful to look at that in a little bit of depth, guys, because it's a familiar passage. You've got the lost sheep, the lost coin, the parable of the prodigal son. They're all telling this same story. But, we should really look at what's going on there and why we should pay attention to it. So, John, what are your overall thoughts? If Christians go, yeah, I've heard that before, I get it. What's different? How should we look at this in terms of sharing our faith?
Well, first of all, we should probably look at the setting of those 3 parables that we see in Luke 15. So Jesus is actually hanging out with people who are considered sinners, right? People who other people look down on. And there are also those who are looking at Jesus doing this who are can't believe that Jesus would be spending time with them, right? So the Pharisees, the religious leaders. And so Jesus is addressing, I think, really both sets of people when he's kind of talking about these 3 parables that we're going to talk about here today. But he's letting it be known to really the kind of uptight religious people that this is God's heart, that his heart is for the one, even the ones that others may look down on, even the tax collectors and sinners. And so I think that setting's really important, because I think today we can sit in the church and we can sort of understand sort of the way God wants us to live, and we can look down on other people who aren't there, and even sort of look at our culture and, sort of bemoan what's going on. And in the process, we can lose that heart that God has for for the lost, for the one even that's lost.
Well, you speak of the heart. One of the things that I've always found so interesting about the Gospel of Luke, but also this chapter, is the Gospel of Luke is written to one person. Most likely. I mean, there's a little bit of debate, but if you go to the very beginning of Luke and Acts, Luke says he writes it to a guy named Theophilus, and that's probably a proper name. Again, some people debate it because the word means lover of God, so it could be just kind of general people who love God, but most of the commentaries I've read say it's a guy, and that's because he's actually designated with the words most excellent Theophilus, which are technical words for somebody who works in the government. Usually, that's how you'd address them. So it's likely that Luke wrote Luke and Acts, most of the New Testament by volume, to one guy. And in that first gospel that he wrote, there's this chapter with this point, hey, there's a value of one person. I don't think it's any kind of coincidence.
That's great. That's great to think that. What if Theophilus hadn't shared it with us? but if Luke is writing to one person, he must believe that one person is valuable, not just because of his rank.
Well, and when you think about, like, what if you're Theophilus too, and you're receiving this for the first time, that I would think he's got to have to think like, whoa, that's me. Like, God cares about me this way. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Don and John. Even just sometimes we can start thinking about how do we share our faith? How do we share our faith? But what is important about us recognizing that no, God did this for us first,
which is a neat irony I hadn't thought about until you shared it. But his name was Lover of God. He was discovering that God is the lover of him, and he's the lover of each individual, every individual. And the common ground, I think the common ground there, the religious authorities are objecting to his spending time with sinners. And so rather than argue theologically, he goes into their realm, into their world, a shepherd, a woman who lost a valuable coin, and a father and his relationship with two sons. And he goes there because I think he knows that people know what it means to value something. And so he finds that common ground with them and tells these parables, or this threefold parable.
Yeah. And so you want to read? Let's just read one of them, one of the short ones, and kind of see what it says so we can pull out this point.
Sure. So after the objection by the Pharisees and the religious leaders, where they summarize their objection, this man receives sinners and eats with them. So he told them this parable. What man of you, this is verse 4, what man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. And I see that even the word one is in there at least 3 times. It's not hard to find that this is a focus early on.
So John, when you read that and you're thinking, how do we help people think more accurately about just sharing their faith and what God wants? What's striking to you about that, and especially in light of a world that we live in, which is very numbers driven and especially big numbers driven?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things that are really valuable here. So one is when people hear about, hey, the need to share Christ, right? So maybe they hear a sermon, or maybe they see some evangelist, that's sort of big and up front and on a stage. Oh, I need to share Jesus with lots of people, right? And you think of their family, and you think of your friends, and you think of your coworkers, and all those people. And it's like, soon it becomes overwhelming, right? And that overwhelm feeling that people might have can keep them from actually ever reaching anyone. And so if we just sort of hone it down to like, I'm not going to be able to reach everyone, but that's okay, because everyone is valuable, right? So So I think that sort of getting this understanding of God's heart for the one can keep us from kind of being stymied by, oh my goodness, we have a lost world. How am I going to reach them all? You're not going to reach them all, but there's ones that you can reach, right? So, and I think that another thing that we can sort of pull out about sort of this value of the one here is that I do think that as Christians, and I think the third of the three parables really sort of moves in this direction, is we can cross people off our list as sort of being too far gone or not worth the effort. And we don't see that in this parable or any of the parables, right? Like what we're seeing is that everyone is worth the effort, worth the hunt, worth the pursuit, right? So I think those two ideas can be really helpful for someone who's wanting to become better and more comfortable sharing Jesus.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that the Reach podcast is brought to you by Search, a ministry dedicated to sharing Jesus through friendships and conversations for nearly 50 years. Learn more or get involved at searchnational.org. That's really helpful, and I think just so needed today, just to take a little bit of the pressure off, if there was on anybody. But if God's heart's for the one, we want to say to everyone, like, everybody has one. You got one. You can do one. And if every serious Christian had one person that they were pursuing, like the person in these parables, I think we would change the world. I really do. And so it's very achievable and doable. And now somebody might be listening. Don, I'll maybe throw this to you, but somebody might be listening. They're going, that sounds awesome. Even sounds doable. One person, okay, I can be intentional with them. I can't think of anybody.
You know, to me, that's kind of rare among Christians, because they're already, most Christians, feeling guilty that they're not part of the Great Commission, and they have somebody in mind. And it's often somebody right close to them. A brother, a sister, a parent, a neighbor, their next door neighbor. I don't know of a time when we introduce this passage and we talk about the value of one, and say that, what if we thought of just one person who doesn't know the Lord? I'll bet God has brought a name to your mind right now. And people are nodding their heads. How many of you have a name right now? And hands go up. So what's cool is that everybody has an audience, I think. Even those who don't think they have non-Christian friends or whatever. There's somebody in their network, somebody in their family. And it terrifies people, especially when the word family member is, you know, I'd rather go on a program to force myself to talk to a stranger and then be done with it. Check that box, I've done evangelism, than to think to have a conversation with my non-Christian father. Or but people's parents, people's brothers and sisters, and their close friends, their fraternity brother, sorority sister, those people come to mind. People tend to have an audience of one.
So really just encouraging people to slow down, think, be prayerful, and they'll probably be able to identify somebody in their world that they don't think is enjoying a relationship with Jesus. But let's say they do that. Okay, guys. So, hey, John, I got my name.
Okay.
I got my person, but I'm not a professional at this like you are. In fact, I might not even be comfortable talking with people in general, or I may be more introverted, or I'm not an evangelist type of person. What do I do next? How do I actually live out this value the one?
Yeah. Oh, you know, I think it just in sort of, you know, practical ways. First of all, it's just showing that you care and that you're interested, right? So, I find a lot of times that people say, "You're such a great listener," right? So you think of evangelism oftentimes as being that we're speaking things, right, to people, and we do, but we often are only heard once we've already been someone who's heard. right? When we've listened well to people. So, and people feel cared for, and they see you as trustworthy when you're a listener. So, so sometimes just valuing the one and going seeking after them is, I'm just checking in on people, sending them texts. Hey, you want to get together for lunch? Or, hey, what's going on? Remember last time you told me this was happening, and you begin to sort of operate in that mode towards people, towards your one, and they'll start sharing with you things that they wouldn't have shared with you before. And as they begin to do that, those become real natural avenues to be able to share Jesus. So, so I just think that, when we have God's heart, we're just always intentionally thinking about, what can I do to connect with that person? What can I do to reach out to them? How can I listen to them? What questions can I ask them? How can I show kindness towards them? And if we begin to do that, then God opens up avenues to share his gospel in meaningful ways.
Yeah. I love the saying that I heard years ago, talk to God about people before you talk to people about God. And I think, what do you do with that one? What you're talking about is loving them. Well, how do you do that? And I think the first easy steps are get them into a prayer list and start regularly praying for them. And I think we write some people off, especially family members. Well, they're never going to believe. That's really a far-fetched thought that my mother would become a Christian or my brother would become a Christian. But have you asked God? And that's, in a way, that's easy, but it's the most powerful thing you can do for the one is to begin to pray for them. So get them in a prayer list and then use the prayer list. And it's a short list. It can be, one person, but think of a time when I get in my car in the morning to go to work, that's going to remind me to pray for this person. Every time I get in the car or every time I brush my teeth or whatever, get it regular. And then second, get them into your calendar. Put their name in a calendar like you're talking about, just to go to coffee with them. Or, I haven't just called them to check up on them, how they're doing. Yeah. Just get them into your calendar. Start there. Talk to God about them, and then get a time to just be with them.
Yeah, that's really good, Don. And again, it's very doable.
Yeah.
Everybody can do this.
That's not threatening.
No.
Yeah. What's threatening about talking to God about a person or going to coffee with somebody? And if you enjoy coffie.
Well, you have to enjoy coffee. Who doesn't enjoy coffee?
I know.
guess a couple people.
That's right. I would question their sanity.
Yeah. I always like to say everybody can do this unless you don't have any friends. But most people have friends. So, if you don't have any friends, you might have bigger problems. But most people have friends, and most people can easily identify one person in their family group that fits kind of what we're talking about here. So, John, I'm going to throw it to you before we close down. I always like to end with this question, which is, what's the one takeaway from all this? We've talked about a bunch of things, all related to value the one, but if somebody's they're listening to this, they might be running into the office or to work when we're done. They're pulling in the parking lot. What do you want them to remember? Yeah.
So if there's somebody that that doesn't know Jesus, just start paying attention to them. Just start letting them know that you're aware of them, you're interested in their world, because I think if you begin to do that, there's going to be opportunities that come about.
Yeah. That's really good. Thank you, guys. Next week's part 2. Come on back. Thanks for listening to the Reach Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.